All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive on something super important if you want to self-publish. Formatting for Amazon KDP. It can seem kind of scary, but we've got a guide here from Mothwalla Media Publications and Vor.
hmm
Well, let me tell you, it is packed with awesome insider tips that even if you've been doing this for a while, you might not know.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting how something as simple as formatting, I mean, it really can make or break your book, not just in terms of how it looks, but, how well it sells and like how much readers enjoy it.
It's true. I mean, we've all picked up a book and the font is just a little bit weird or like
Mhm.
the spacing is just off and,
Yeah.
it could just like totally throw you off even if the story's
Mhm.
good. But this guide makes it clear that, you know, anyone can make their book look professional even if you're not like a design expert.
Yeah, and one of the things that it really emphasizes is starting with a clean manuscript. Before you get to all the fancy stuff with the designs, like laying a solid foundation before you build a house or something.
Oh, that's a good analogy. So we're talking like zero typos, consistent grammar, really just nailing down all those little details. What's interesting to me is that the guide really stresses doing that. Like even before you start thinking about fonts and margins.
Yeah, because it really is about building trust with the reader from the very first page. I mean, if they see typos and inconsistencies right away, it kind of screams amateur,
Yeah,
and they might not trust what you have to say as an author.
that's a good point. I never thought of it like that. So things like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, those can really help with that, like catching those mistakes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're lifesavers.
Okay, so then the guide goes into the basics,
hmm
like, picking a standard font, 12-point size, those sorts of things. Kind of obvious. But it's a good reminder that those choices still matter. What I found really interesting, though, is the section on choosing the right book size and margins. It gets surprisingly, strategic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just picking something that looks nice. Like different genres actually have like standard sizes. For example, 5 by 8 inches is really common for fiction. But if you're writing nonfiction, 6 by 9 is more popular.
Wait, really? So, like, a mystery novel should be a different size than a self-help book.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about reader expectations, what feels right for each genre. And then there's the margins too. Most authors don't realize that those actually have a functional purpose, especially the inside margins.
Oh, really? I always thought they were just, you know, to make the page look less crowded.
Well, that is part of it, but the inside margin is super important for like thicker books. It has to be bigger so that when the book is bound, the text doesn't disappear into the spine.
Oh, wow. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Imagine trying to read a book
Hmm.
and like half the words are hidden. Not a good reading experience.
That's a good point. Okay, so then the guide splits into two different paths, formatting for ebooks and formatting for print. It seems like those would be pretty different.
Oh, yeah, they definitely are. With ebooks, it's all about creating a reflowable format, which basically means that the content has to adapt to different devices and screen sizes. Someone might be reading your book on a phone, or a tablet, or a huge computer monitor, and it needs to look good on all of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the tools that people use for ebook formatting? Does the guide mention anything specific?
It recommends Microsoft Word, Scrivener,
Hmm.
and Readsy Editor. Those are all good options because they let you control things like heading styles, paragraph indents, and text alignment, which are all really important for ebooks.
So it's all about having that control over how the text flows. But what's interesting, in ebooks, you don't have to worry about page numbers.
Right. Those don't matter anymore.
Thank goodness. One less thing to think about.
Yeah.
But what about those little details? Like, are there specific settings for indents and alignment that I should be using?
Yeah. The guide suggests using like a 0.3-inch indent for the first line of each paragraph and sticking with left alignment for the main text. Unless it's something like a chapter title. Then usually center alignment looks best, but the most important thing is to be consistent.
Oh, that makes sense. Consistent throughout the entire book.
Exactly.
Got it. So that seems pretty straightforward for ebooks. But I have a feeling print formatting is a whole other beast, right?
Yeah, it can be a bit more complex. Yeah. The guide mentions Adobe InDesign and Atticus as really powerful tools for that. But don't worry if those sound intimidating. You can even use Microsoft Word, as long as you know what you're doing.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, though there's a term that pops up in the guide that I'm not familiar with. Front matter. What is that exactly?
Basically, it's everything that comes before the main content of your book, like the title page,
Right.
the copyright page, dedication, table of contents, all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
One kind of cool tip the guide mentions is that those pages aren't numbered.
Oh, you're right. I never noticed that before.
Yeah, it's one of those subtle things that makes a book look really professional.
Got it. So those pages are kind of like the silent but important opening act. Okay, so what about all the other stuff on the pages? Like the headers and the page numbers. Sometimes there are like those weird single lines of text at the top or bottom. What are those all about?
Oh, yeah. Headers are super useful for adding your book title or author name to each page. Again, it just adds to that professional feel. And then page numbers are obviously crucial for navigating a physical book. Those single lines you're talking about are called widows and orphans. Basically, they happen when a paragraph break leaves a single line stranded at the top or bottom of a page. It's considered bad typography.
I see.
But luckily, they're pretty easy to fix.
So it's really all about those little details adding up to make a big difference. Now, there's another term the guide mentions that I have no idea what it means. Bleed. What in the world is bleed?
Oh, bleed is basically just an extra margin that you add to pages that have images or graphics that go right to the edge of the page, so that when the book is printed and trimmed, there aren't any like unsightly white slivers around the image.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's kind of like when you have a picture frame that fits perfectly around a picture with no gaps.
Exactly.
So like if I have a travel book and there's a beautiful landscape photo that takes up the whole page, I would want that photo to go right to the edge without any white border.
Exactly. And speaking of images, the guide emphasizes that it's not just about picking a pretty picture. The technical stuff matters too.
I bet. So what kind of things should we be thinking about when it comes to images? What does the guide recommend?
Well, one of the biggest things is resolution. Especially for print books, you need at least 300 dpi, which stands for dots per inch, to make sure the image looks sharp and clear in the final printed product. Otherwise, it's going to look pixelated and unprofessional. And then there are file formats to think about. JPEG and PNG are the most commonly used.
Okay, so high resolution is a must. What about placing images? Any tips on how to make them look their best?
The guide recommends centering them most of the time. And if you need to add captions, just make sure they're consistent throughout the book.
Hmm.
Again, it's all about creating a unified and professional look.
So now I'm imagining like a travel book with all these beautiful photos, but I know images can get tricky with ebooks because of file sizes. Does the guide talk about that at all?
It does, yeah. It emphasizes the importance of image compression, especially for ebooks. Basically, compressing an image reduces its file size without sacrificing too much quality, which is important for faster download times and, just a smoother reading experience.
Sounds like you're packing for a trip. You want to fit everything you need in your suitcase, but you don't want to make it too heavy, so you got to pack efficiently.
Exactly.
Speaking of making things easier, the guide mentions something that sounds like a dream come true. Styles and templates. It recommends bookdesigntemplates.com and Atticus. Why are those so helpful?
Well, templates are great because they basically take the guesswork out of formatting. They give you a pre-designed framework that ensures your book looks professional and consistent. And the best part is you can still customize them to fit your specific vision.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It's like having a professional designer create the basic structure for you. And then you get to add your own little personal touches.
Exactly.
But what about people who are more comfortable with Microsoft Word? Does the guide have any advice for them?
Yeah, it talks about creating custom styles in Word, which are basically like preset formatting rules that you can apply to different elements of your text. Like, for example, you could create a specific style for chapter titles with a particular font and size and spacing. And then every time you apply that style, those rules are automatically applied.
That sounds like a huge time saver.
It is.
And it makes sure your book is consistent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm.
So once we've done all that hard work formatting our book and it's looking amazing, now we have to convert it to the formats that Amazon likes, right?
Exactly.
Which are-
For ebooks, Amazon accepts .docx, .epub, or .mobi files. And for print books, you'll need a print-ready PDF.
Okay. And the guide also emphasizes the importance of previewing those files before you hit publish.
Yeah.
Why is that step so important?
Well, because what you see on your computer screen might not be how it looks on an actual Kindle device or in a printed book. Amazon has some really helpful previewer tools that let you see how your book will look on different devices. You can catch any errors or formatting issues before you make your book live.
That's a really good tip. Better to catch those errors early on than to have to fix them after your book is already out there.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that are important but easy to forget, metadata. All those little pieces of information that help readers find your book.
Yeah, metadata is super important.
I get that it's important, but honestly, my eyes kind of glaze over when I hear all the technical terms. Can you break it down for me? And for all our listeners who might be feeling the same way.
Of course. Think of metadata as your book's backstage pass. It's the information that helps Amazon categorize your book, showcase it to the right readers, and make it searchable.
Okay, I like that analogy. So what exactly does metadata include?
It includes things like your title and subtitle, which should be catchy and relevant to your book's content, your author bio, which gives readers a glimpse into who you are and why you wrote the book, and then those all-important keywords that we talked about earlier.
Right, the keywords. Those are the terms that readers might type into Amazon when they're looking for a book like yours.
Exactly. It's all about anticipating what readers might search for and making sure your book shows up in the results.
Makes sense.
And don't forget about choosing the right categories for your book. Amazon has a whole system of categories and subcategories, and picking the most relevant ones will help your book get seen by the right people.
Okay, so it's kind of like
Yeah.
you're putting your book on a giant virtual bookshelf.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure it ends up in the right section. Now I think it's time to get a little more personal. I'm curious, have any of you listening ever been totally put off by a book that was just badly formatted? Like maybe the font was driving you crazy, or the spacing made your eyes hurt. I know I have. Share your experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear what formatting fails have made you want to throw a book across the room.
Yeah, it's amazing how those little things can really ruin a good book. I've definitely been there. Like, I just couldn't keep reading because the formatting was so bad. Even if the story was good, it just makes you feel like the author didn't really care.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's like going to a fancy restaurant
Yeah.
and finding a hair in your soup. Like, you're trying to enjoy it, but you just can't. So,
Let's say we've done all the hard work. We've formatted our book. We've got it looking amazing. And we've converted it to those formats that Amazon likes. The .docx, .epub, .mobi files for ebooks. And the PDF for print. What are the final steps? Well, first of all, congratulations. Getting your book formatted and ready to publish is a big accomplishment. We've already talked about using Amazon's previewer tools to make sure everything looks good on different devices. But once you've done that, and you're happy with how your book looks.
actually, before we move on, can we go back to metadata for a second? I know we talked about it before, but I'm still a little confused.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what it is again and why it's so important?
Sure. It's easy to get lost in all the details. Think of metadata as like your book's secret weapon. It's the information that helps Amazon categorize your book, recommend it to the right readers, and make sure it shows up in search results.
Okay, I like that. So what exactly goes into metadata?
Well, it includes things like your title and subtitle. Those should be catchy and relevant to your book's content. And then your author bio. That gives readers a little glimpse into who you are and why you wrote this book. And then there are the keywords.
Right. The keywords.
Those are super important because they're the terms that readers might use when they're searching for a book like yours on Amazon.
So it's all about thinking like a reader and anticipating what they might type into the search bar.
Yeah, exactly. And then don't forget about choosing the right categories for your book. Amazon has a whole system of categories and subcategories, and you want to pick the ones that are most relevant to your book.
Okay, so it's kind of like you're organizing your book on a giant virtual bookshelf, and you want to make sure it ends up in the right section.
That's a good way to think about it.
So once we've got all our metadata squared away, and we're finally ready to hit that publish button, what happens next?
Well, that's when the real fun begins. Because now it's time to tell the world about your amazing book.
So it's like shout it from the rooftops.
Pretty much. Social media is your best friend.
Okay.
But here's a tip from the guide that I found really interesting. When you're promoting your book online, share visuals of both the cover and the interior.
Wait, really? Why is it important to show the inside of the book? I thought the cover was the main thing.
Well, the cover is definitely important. But showing off the interior design lets potential readers see how beautifully formatted your book is. It's like giving them a little sneak peek of what the reading experience will be like.
Oh, I see. Like you're inviting them in.
Exactly.
And the guide also suggests mentioning the professional formatting in your marketing materials, which makes sense. We put so much effort into it. Why not brag about it a little?
Absolutely.
And speaking of making a good impression, what about reviews? Those can be so important for new authors.
They really are.
Does the guide have any tips for encouraging reviews?
It suggests asking your early readers to specifically mention the book's readability and design in their reviews. You know, talk about how well formatted the book is and how much they enjoyed reading it.
So it's all about social proof.
Yeah.
Seeing that other people had a good experience can really make a difference. Now, before we wrap up this section, I'm going to ask our listeners a question. Have you ever read a book where the formatting actually made the story better? Like maybe the font choice or the layout perfectly captured the mood or the setting. I'd love to hear about those instances where formatting went above and beyond. Share your thoughts in the comments.
It's so cool when authors use formatting to really bring the story to life. I read a mystery novel recently, and the chapter titles were designed to look like old newspaper headlines, which I thought was so clever.
Oh yeah, that's a great example. It's those little creative touches that can really make a book stand out. And it reminds us that formatting isn't just about following rules, it's also about making artistic choices that complement the story and, reflect your unique voice as an author.
So it's like we've been saying, taking those technical elements and infusing them with your own creativity,
Yes, yeah.
using fonts and spacing and layout to create a visual experience, that enhances the words on the page. You can almost think of it as setting the stage for your story. You know how a theater production uses lighting and set design and costumes
Yeah.
to create a certain atmosphere?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. You're using formatting to enhance the mood and tone of your book.
I love that analogy. So if you're writing a dark, suspenseful thriller,
Mhm.
you might choose a bolder, more dramatic font.
Right.
But if you're writing a lighthearted romance,
Yeah.
you might go for something more elegant and whimsical.
Exactly. And then there are all those smaller details that can add so much personality, like chapter headers, drop caps, even the amount of space between paragraphs. Those little things can make a big difference.
So it's really about creating an experience for the reader,
Mm-hmm.
not just giving them a block of text.
Right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of formatting, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've covered the technical how-to, we talked
Yeah.
about metadata,
Yeah.
and the marketing side of things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what matters most is this. What unique visual style will you create for your book?
That's the question every author should be asking themselves. Think about your target audience, the genre you're writing in, and the overall mood you want to create. And then let your creativity run wild.
There's no right or wrong answer. It's all about finding what feels right for you and your story. So go forth and format with confidence, and be sure to share your creations with us. We want to hear about your formatting wins, or even your formatting fails. Leave a comment below.
Yes, definitely. Let's keep the conversation going. And most importantly, have fun with it.
That's what it's all about, making your book the best it can be, inside and out. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into formatting for Amazon KDP. Until next time, keep writing, keep formatting, and keep those creative juices flowing.